So my name is Kellie Morris. I am the project coordinator for the Universal Response to Domestic Violence, and my co-presenter is Maritza Garcia. She is the Beacon Dart Advocate. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone has access to the chat function. It seems like everyone does have their computer linked up. That's where I'm going to try to field questions. So just if you have anything that you would like to ask at any point in the presentation, just put it in the chat feature, and I'll pause at a couple of points as well for any questions and answers. All right. All right, is everyone able to see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Today we are covering just the basics of domestic violence. Have a overview, if this will change slides. First, we'll touch on the Center for Victim Safety and Support and what services are offered there, and then provide a general overview of domestic violence, the system's response in Dutchess, some resources, and have some additional time at the end for questions. The Center for Victim Safety and Support is based out of Family Services, and I will turn it over to Maritza to explain a little bit about what they do.
Thanks, Kellie, and good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? We're good. Okay. So Center for Victim Safety and Support is a non-residential service for all victims of crime. We're located at the annex in the partnership at 29 North Hamilton. We're there for walk-ins, and we also have appointments. At this time, because of COVID, we are responding to remotely return back to work. As of next week, it'll be will be available for those who want to walk in and seek out services. So check in with us so that we can give you a full plan on how that and what it's going to look like. So we're a non-residential service for all victims of crime. We have a 24-hour hotline that covers domestic violence and a rape crisis hotline. We have crisis teams that are there during the day, and then after 5:00 p.m., we use an answering service that redirects the calls with the same hotlines over to the staff that's on call for that day. We also do an advocacy and accompaniment. Again, due to the COVID, we have had a pause in the accompaniment. Physically, however, working remotely from home, we have been able to assist clients with walking them through the same systems, but by phone, via phone. So a client gets to court, she gives us a call, and we walk the client through the process of obtaining whatever it is they're there to petition for at that moment. Advocacy, we work with whatever issue the client may be having at the time. We do, with release forms, reach out to other parties and agencies to kind of work collaboratively to be able to assist the client in whatever the client's need may be. We do have counseling services and support groups. So we do have counseling that is in the form of the 24-hour hotlines and the evening hours. We do have support groups that will, once we get back, we'll start to form again. And these are groups that are there for domestic violence victims, victim of sexual assault. And we also have a group that we work collaboratively with Kathy Peluso, which is a group for families that have lost family members due to a crime. Crisis intervention is what we do a lot more of. We do have in that form, we have advocates that are stationed and working out of different jurisdictions within the police department, the sheriff's office. We work closely in intervention with the victims and supporting them through those different systems. We do have a DART program that is domestic abuse response team that responds to a lot of the incident reports that get called in to the department. The police departments then connect with us. It's a 24-hour. We find that if we can connect with a victim at the onset of an incident, the chances of having that client connect with us and be able to be more willing to receive services and be able to remove or assist her in safety planning to get her away from the abuse. It's a very it's a delicate time. It's a perfect time to try to reach in. The officer will call it in, connect the victim to an advocate. The advocate would describe and explain our services and offer the emotional support. And at that time, we continue to connect with a follow-up call with that client. The rape crisis services, we do accompany clients to the hospitals. When a rape victim is brought in, we work with Vassar Hospital and with Mid-Hudson Regional, and they know to call our 24-hour hotline to request that an advocate meet with the client, to come in and meet with the victim. We meet with the victim and stay with the victim throughout the exam. If the client wants to have the exam, we will sit with them and we will support them through that. And then we continue to follow up with that victim and with the crime that has occurred at the moment to the victim. So it's a full service. It doesn't just end at the hospital. It continues as long as the client wants us to assist in reporting with the DA's office. If there's any mental health and therapy and counseling that needs to follow with that, we're there to support them in those crises. Safety planning is something that's we're doing a lot of remotely these days. It's a plan that with the help of the victim, we get to put together to assist the victim in trying to remain safe, to remain alive while at this moment, due to COVID again, living with an abuser, living in a situation where they are staying in place and unable to, have that break or unable to leave. So we safety plan. If there are no risks, the client lets us know, well informed, whether or not we can move forward in speaking. Some clients are using code words to connect with us, and also to let us know whether it's a good time or not a good time. But safety planning is tailored around the client situation. So we do not put all clients in a box and have a formula that we say, well, you have to fit into this and it has to be this way. We let the client tell their story. We let the client format for us what would be a safety risk, what is a good method, who are your support systems, who can we connect you to, with all confidentiality, who can we talk to if you want to, through release forms. So safety planning is tailor-made for all clients. I never put them all in the same. They look very different, though the questions may be the same or similar, the outcomes may be very different based on the victim that's in front of you. The Lethality Assessment tool is something that we've been using now in Dutchess County. We're very proud of it. It is a tool that we use to identify, along with the law enforcement, to identify which of the victims are at a higher risk of being murdered. Which victim, if we can kind of separate a domestic violence case where, it might not have escalated to a certain degree of a risk of being murdered, how can we tell? And so we use the Lethality Assessment tool to help us identify those victims. The officers will be called to a domestic violence intimate partner. They will go out, they will respond, they will separate the parties, and when it is safe for them to do so, they would administer, with the victim's approval, administer the 11 questions on the lethality assessment that have been proven to identify to us the factors and to red flag for us the risk in that particular case. Once the assessment is completed, if the victim scores as assessed as high danger, that person is immediately asked to speak with an advocate. Again, it's a victim's choice. That victim will speak with us, and we will do a safety plan at that moment with the client on the phone to assess what can be done given the factors that she's shared with us according to her victimization and what she's going through. The lethality assessment is being used now in a lot of the police stations. We have Beacon is on board. We have the city and town of Poughkeepsie using them, the sheriff's department. We have troopers that are using it, Fishkill, East Fishkill. So I believe at this point, and Kellie, you can jump in, that everybody is pretty much on board and that the lethality tool is something that is now something we are always using.
Yes, that's correct. All 7 in Dutchess County are on board, and we're piloting the program with Arlington Fire Department as EMS first responders.
Perfect. And so that's a good thing that EMS, they can also be our eyes and ears. They also have a lot of first contact with victims, and they're willing to learn to identify, what are some of the signs of domestic violence victimization and abuse. So for information and referrals, we are always trying to stay connected to resources, work with communities collaboratively, find out who's offering what services we can connect our clients to meet whatever particular needs they are. And they can be anything from, needing a pantry to also needing to be replaced, and need furniture or beddings or whatever the need is for that particular family. It's our job at CVSS to stay well informed, to stay connected, to go out into the community, to work collaboratively with community. We're very big on educating and awareness, so we always put out into the community, do outreach programs so that we can let the community be well informed, so that the community also can assist us in being our eyes and ears. So we'll have a lot of phone calls from, neighbors and parents just questioning. We do once a year, we have our walk a mile. And so it's a big community awareness that we reach out to the community and say, hey, come on in. We have an information desk, and we want to just inform and do that educational piece for the community. Referrals, so we work collaboratively with a few of the community agencies. We are making referrals to legal services of the Hudson Valley. We have a mental health also component that we can refer clients to. I don't have all the partners information with me, but feel free to look up our website. It kind of lets you know who's working with us. Please, if you're out there and you're within the, hearing my voice, connect with us. Maybe there's something that we can do and work together to, expand the information and the referral resource that we currently have. Prevention, so I do a lot of community outreach. We do a lot of tabling. We do a lot of knocking on doors of agencies and communities, a lot of phone calls. I hear this is coming up in town. Can we be part of that? I hear you're having an event. Can we sign up for tabling? We try to sign up for a lot of webinars, and we're now currently doing our own and being able to put those pieces out there. Community outreach is a big thing for us, because the community is what builds everybody doing what they do best, and then us coming together to be able to put that out for the community to have hands-on. And so I'm a lot of a hands-on type of person, reaching out to communities. I visit churches. I do DB 101 presentations, as well as some of the staff and co-workers. We do a lot of getting out there and finding out who's who and who's we can work closely with to kind of get the same message out about DV and sexual assault. And we work with any victims of crime. We're not specific to just DV and sexual assault, but if there's a community person who's become a victim of a robbery, a shooting, we work with all kinds of victims of crimes. And we do refer OVS claims out, which is, you know, we work closely with trying to do and provide restitution via OVS claims for clients, so they don't have to figure that component out by themselves at a time when they have so much on their plate. System intervention located at the 17 locations that Kellie mentioned. We have a high-risk response team. So these are cases where our staff person, Monica, reaches out to the team of the, and Kellie, you can help me out because I'm probably going to forget all of the team. But I know that we work closely with mental health, the DA's office, the sheriff's office. Who else, Kellie?
Yeah, so the high-risk response team is made up of key law enforcement. So we have the sheriff's office on board. We also have probation and the district attorney's office. We have representatives from behavioral health as well as the health department. We have a public health nurse who's available for assistance with our high-risk victims. We also have Grace Smith House, one of the local shelters, and obviously family services is represented through the Center for Victim Safety and Support. And all of these folks come together once a month to discuss high-risk cases. These are cases that are at a really, really high risk for lethality, and we look critically at how the system can intervene to provide some additional safety measures for those victims. And it also increases collaboration and morale among the system's response. The domestic abuse response teams that are located in the city of Poughkeepsie, city of Beacon, town of Poughkeepsie, and town of Hyde Park function similarly, except for they are conferencing every single arrest that's domestic violence related in those respective jurisdictions. And again, that's law enforcement, probation, the district attorney's office, CVSS, and myself. And we often flag cases there that would be eligible for high risk. The Lethality Assessment Program, as Maritza had mentioned, is in all 17 jurisdictions and Arlington Fire Department. It's 11-question screen that determines lethality for homicide. And CVSS also works very collaboratively with the Sexual Assault Response Team, or SART.
Thank you, Kellie.
So,
I'll turn it back to you.
On a national level, domestic violence is incredibly common. There are 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men who have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. And in the US, an average of 20 people are physically abused by their intimate partners every minute. On a typical day, there are more than 21,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines across the country. About 15% of all violent crime have intimate partner violence at the core. And this is just the national level. We'll bring it home a little bit. In Dutchess County, there were 3,822 domestic violence incidents reported to police in 2019. Since 2010, we've had 15 domestic violence related homicides. And annually, there are nearly 4,000 calls to the CVSS domestic violence hotline. That's not including the calls that are directly to Grace Smith House or House of Hope, the 2 residential programs in Dutchess. So what exactly is domestic violence? It's a pattern of coercive tactics, which include physical, psychological, sexual, economic, and emotional abuse perpetrated by one person against an adult intimate partner with the goal of establishing and maintaining power and control over the victim. power and control is really key in domestic violence situations. We have a YouTube video available. I will make sure that we get it sent out to anyone who's interested. If you want to watch this, it's a video covering a woman who actually lived in the Hudson Valley, well, lower Hudson Valley area, who was a victim of domestic violence. She went on 2020 to discuss her story. There's actual footage of the abuse, which is one of the reasons I don't want to show it right now. I would like for you to watch it if you're interested, but I don't want to present any traumatic experiences to folks at this time. So if you want that, you can either write down that link or just Google Breaking Point 2020, and it should come up. So what are some of the tactics of control? Physical violence is something that automatically comes to mind when people think domestic violence. But there's a lot more than just physical violence that go into it. There's sexual violence, as well as emotional and psychological abuse. Isolation, coercion, threats, and intimidation are all key parts of control. Minimizing, denying, and blaming the victim, minimizing their own behavior or denying that they did something, blaming the victim for why they physically assaulted them or emotionally abused them. Using children, something that we very commonly see in domestic violence situations, threats to call CPS, threats to get the children taken away, saying that they will hurt the children if the victim doesn't do something that the offender wants them to do. In heterosexual relationships, often using male privilege. Economic abuse, not allowing the victim to have access to their own money or have access to any shared money, controlling how much they get, kind of like an allowance, but in a much more sinister way. This is the power and control wheel. It's something that we often use to help victims understand exactly what they're going through. Maritza, if you want to talk a little bit more about how this plays into your work with victims.
So a lot of times a victim will come in and share her story. So she or he will share their story. And as they share their story, after allowing them to give me some of what's been going on in terms of the history of abuse, I can then help them with this power wheel, which describes and breaks down exactly some of the things that they've been saying in their story. So I kind of put a word. It's an educational tool for them. It's an awareness tool. It's an aha moment. It assists in identifying a lot of what sometimes victims have a problem putting together in words. It helps to identify why sometimes some of the things in that person's situation may look the way it does or may sound the way it does. And it puts it into perspective that this is not just bad behavior, but that it is identified, that we do have a word for it, that the whole coercion and the whole intimidation and emotional abuse, what it feels like, looks like, sounds like, is part of a power and control, and that there is a victim and that there is an abuser, and that this is how the scenarios can play out. I find in my work with victims that once I go over this wheel, you start to read the body language, or they'll verbalize to you, I didn't know. I didn't know that that's what was happening to me, but now that I see it, and you're helping me to identify these things, they start to slowly come to their own realization of what it is.
Yeah, and it also helps to show victims that they're not alone, that there are other people out there that are experiencing these same things. Otherwise, why would there be a published wheel discussing exactly what they're experiencing? There are a lot of myths surrounding domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and today we want to debunk some of those. Alcohol and drug use may be a symptom, but it's not an excuse. Someone might be more abusive when they're under the influence of alcohol or a drug. However, that doesn't excuse the behavior, and it doesn't negate the fact that there is abuse still happening. And oftentimes there's a difference between a toxic relationship and domestic violence. Domestic violence, again, has that power and control going on. So they might even use alcohol and drugs to control the victim. So that's another way that that plays into it, but it's not an excuse and it is not the sole reason for domestic violence. Someone being stressed does not mean that they have a right to abuse someone or treat them poorly. We all deal with stress in our daily lives, but we don't beat our significant others because of that. And that's something that is often commonly said, well, oh, he was stressed out or she was stressed out, that's why they did that. That is not a reason for domestic violence. Again, it goes back to that power and control. Mental illness, again, is not a reason for this. Someone might be suffering from a mental illness and be lashing out, but they need to get treatment. They need help. They need to have some kind of intervention that their partner cannot provide for them. And it does not mean that someone has to suffer for that. A loss of control. They just get so angry that they smash everything or that they, throw something at the victim. That does not, again, excuse any kind of domestic violence. And when we're hearing these things, a lot of times victims minimize what's happened because they do feel responsible in some way. They feel like it's deserted. Anger or a bad temper. You'll see a lot of times domestic violence advocates pushing back against anger management being used to address domestic violence offenders' behavior. That doesn't address the root of the issue. Yes, anger is a symptom, but it's not the reason. Poverty or lack of education. Domestic violence crosses all boundaries. It doesn't care what your race or your income level is. It affects every neighborhood. You can drive down the street and look at every house, 1 in 3. That doesn't mean, obviously, that your neighbors are domestic violence abusers or victims, but that puts it into perspective that 1 in 3 people, regardless of their age or their lifestyle or anything, will be a domestic violence victim at some point in their life. Victims do not provoke domestic violence. It is the offender's behavior that is causing it. It doesn't matter if the victim is poking and prodding or looking through the offender's phone. They do not deserve to be beaten for that. Cultural traditions are sometimes used as a reason for this. It's just what happens in my family. My family's always done this. And there is generational domestic violence. That is a known fact. But that doesn't mean that it has to continue. We can break that cycle. Maritza, is there anything you would like to add to the myths of domestic violence?
Well, there is one thing when you mention anger management, anger and bad temper. We'll often hear in court where the abuser, the accountability is that, hey, you have to go now and be mandated to anger management classes. And we're always saying, but it's abuse. They're two separate things. And so just that, that's a red flag. And clients often, because they hear that out in the community and the systems that are helping them, they also start to believe, well, it's just he has a bad temper. So you'll often hear that type of statement coming from a victim.
And the last one is economy. We know that loss of employment is a risk factor for lethality, but it's simply because now the offender has more time on their hands. It doesn't mean that someone who is underemployed is necessarily going to be more or less abusive. The economy impacts domestic violence in the way that person might exert more control over their victim because they have no control over what's happening in the economy. In domestic violence, there's this constant cycle. there's always this honeymoon phase um, after the abuse has happened where the victim feels hopeful and feels like, oh, yeah, it was a one-time thing. The tension slowly starts to build and more things start to happen until there's just this explosive fight, whether that's physical violence, emotional violence, or something along those lines. And the victim then starts to feel like it's their fault. Um, and he starts to make excuses, minimizing what happened, um, and saying, well, if you hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have done this. And then it just cycles over and over and over. It doesn't start out like this. It doesn't start out in this explosive fight. If someone punched you on a first date, you wouldn't go on a date with them again. It always slowly builds until it gets to that point. It's something that happens over time. It might start off with some degrading comments, isolating from family or friends. Oh, I don't like that person. You shouldn't hang out with them. And then it slowly becomes something more. It gets to the point where the victim feels cut off from their support system, like they don't have a way out, that their offender is their source of support, that they are their only friend, and they want to forgive the person that they love. So why do victims stay? I touched on it a little bit already. Uh, the victim remembers the person that they fell in love with before the abuse began, and they want to believe that it will end, that the person that they're with will become a better person because they want to see that good in the offender. And it's not that they want to end the relationship. It's not that they want to be away from this person forever. They just want the abuse to stop. And that's oftentimes why you will hear instances of victims calling the cops to come out and stop the abuse, but they don't want to go forward and press charges. They don't want the person to get in trouble because they love them, but they need to be safe and they want to be safe. There's also so many other reasons why victims stay. They might feel ashamed that they're being hurt by a person that they love. And they may think, well, this just doesn't happen to people like me. Domestic violence doesn't happen to people like me. There's a strong feeling of terror that if they do leave, they will get hurt worse, that their children will get hurt. And sometimes victims can't leave because they can't safely take the children. Money is a huge restriction in domestic violence situations. They may have no money at all because the abuser has taken it all, or they may have to hide their money in a shoebox and hope that the abuser doesn't hide it because that's the only way that they can keep their financial resources safe. And if it's $1 here, $1 there, it takes a while before they have enough money to safely leave, whether that's to get a bus ticket, get a plane ticket, or find a safe place to stay. There's a fear of the unknown. You know where the abuser is when you're living with them. You don't know where they are when you aren't. If you find a safe place to stay, you don't know that the abuser won't show up and stalk you. And there's also that fear of, I'm leaving this person that I fell in love with. Will I ever fall in love again? Sometimes the abuser is a very respected community member. They might be a religious leader, a law enforcement officer, a doctor, a politician. Abusers frequently are charismatic and charming to the outside world. It's only at home that they show their true colors. And that can be very difficult for a victim. That kind of goes back to the shame of maybe it is me. They're so nice to everyone else in the community, so maybe it is me. Isolation is one of the biggest techniques that abusers will use. They may be physically isolated or they may just be emotionally isolated. They may have been told so many lies about their friends and family that they feel like they can't trust anyone and that they don't have the support they need, or they might literally be locked in the house. And the impact of ongoing abuse is constant and it is lasting. If you're constantly being told the things that victims are hearing from their abusers every day, isolated, have no reinforcement of the positives in your life or about you, then in all likelihood, your self-esteem is completely gone and you don't feel like you have the ability to exist outside of this relationship. Maritza, is there anything you would like to add?
No, Kelly, I think this pretty much gives a clear picture of all the dynamics and how they all come into play together. And this, we're looking at it individually, but this is one person, one life, all these dynamics that being subjected to it. So thank you.
So what can we do as community members and as people when a victim discloses? We have to be careful to not minimize or make excuses for the abuser or blame the victim. We definitely should not be judging the victim for what they're going through. And we shouldn't be insulting the abuser either. This is still a person that they love. Insulting the abuser can only harm the victim. And as a domestic violence victim, that doesn't mean that they're a bad parent. Doesn't mean that they're incapable of providing proper support to their children. And how should we respond? Respond with validation. Let them know that what's happening is real and that their feelings are valid. Empower them to make their own decisions. Believe them. Support whatever decision they want to make and respect that decision. And offer them options like the CVSS hotline. You can draw from your resources, whatever resources you know of in your community, whether that's just the hotline or if you know DCFS has, the Department of Community and Family Services has DVLs, domestic violence liaisons on site, if you're able to tap into that resource. Whatever you are aware of, maybe it's a different community organization that you think can help them. You become the facilitator in getting that individual access to resources. It could just be giving them a number. It could be offering them a ride to 29 North Hamilton. It could be anything that the victim feels is safe for them. And if you're not sure what's safe for them or how to help them come up with a safety plan, call the hotline. Advocates are trained in this. They know all of the best options. They know ways to work around what's going on and figure out what the safe options are right then. So in Dutchess County, this is how our system responds. We already went over the high-risk case management program, the lethality assessment program, and the domestic abuse response team. My program is the Universal Response to Domestic Violence. It's a systems response, a coordinated community response to domestic violence. So we have key law enforcement, the district attorney's office, probation, the health department, the public defender's office, family services, Grace Smith House and House of Hope, DCFS, and a few other folks who meet once a month to discuss what's going on for domestic violence victims, discuss ways that we can enhance our systems response, discuss how each individual agency is responding, and workshop if there's a way that we can support each other and make sure that we're all communicating. The sexual assault response team is essentially the same thing. They also include hospitals, since that's where sexual assault victims frequently present. And it's really just trying to create an enhanced multidisciplinary team to domestic violence and sexual assault. So these are the hotline numbers. I'm going to leave this slide up while we field any questions. If anyone has anything that they would like for me to go back on, cover a little bit more in depth, or if you just have questions about what other resources are available, please let me know. Maritza, are you able to see the chat?
Yes, Kelly, I'm looking at it. I don't have any questions on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I've also included my contact information as well as Maritza's. So if you want to discuss any further, please let me know. Email is definitely the best way to reach out to me right now. I need to check my office numbers forwarding settings again. And Maritza, you can reach her via email or phone, or you could call the hotline and she might be the one that answers.
That's right.
All right. If no one has any other questions, then we can wrap up. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great day.